So I was really surprised by the fact that your book, Taxes for Humans, wasn't boring.
Welcome to the Sunlight Tax Podcast. In this show, we're talking about taxes, money, and careers for self-employed people who have a big vision for changing the world with their work. I'm your host, Hannah Cole, artist, design nerd, tax pro, author of Taxes for Humans, and the founder of Sunlight Tax. If you're a creative, wellness, or mission-driven entrepreneur who wants to grow your business sustainably, manage your taxes, and build a stash of fuck you money so you can control your time and have a bigger impact with your work, you are in the right place.
Today on the podcast, I'm speaking with artist, accountant, and founder of Sunlight Tax, Hannah Cole, about her new book, Taxes for Humans. Hannah's book is a rare thing, a tax guide that's actually interesting to read. It's written specifically for self-employed, creative people who never got a tax education in school. And nobody gets an education in taxes in school, so that's pretty much everyone. What makes this book different from other tax books is that Hannah explains not just the how, but the why behind our tax system, giving you the context you need to actually understand what you're doing. Just like you need context to understand contemporary art, you need context to understand taxes. And Hannah's background as an artist is what makes this book engaging and even funny instead of dry and intimidating. We talk about why taxes don't have to be boring, how the book addresses the judgment and shame so many artists feel around money, and Hannah's secret agenda to turn passionate, creative people into better activists. We also dig into some surprising ways that taxes can actually give back to you, from tax advantage retirement accounts to disaster relief benefits. And speaking of tax deductions, it's December, which means it's the perfect time to invest in your professional development. Hannah's book is a business expense, and so is the network membership. Both are fully tax deductible, so you can set yourself up for success in 2026 while lowering your tax bill for 2025. If you've ever felt lost, judged, or overwhelmed by your taxes, this conversation is for you. All right, let's get into it. Hannah Cole, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, thanks, Paddy, for having me. So good to see you.
Yeah, so we're here to talk about your new book, Taxes for Humans, which is available for everyone. It's in bookstores now. Can you tell me a little bit about the book? Who is it for? What is it? Just give me a broad overview for people who might be interested in something like this.
Sure. Well, the subtitle of the book is Simplify Your Taxes and Change the World When You're Self-Employed. So I hope that you can see that there's a bit of a civic angle there, because I kind of feel people like us make great activists. So that's definitely a secret project inside the book. But really what the book is like the tax guide that I wish I had had when I was coming out of art school. It's the no judgment, no shame. You didn't learn this in school, though you wish you had guide that can just be a reference for you, because there's a whole section in it called The Fix, which is just about fixing a messed up tax situation. But it also is a guide that helps you just do your taxes. So it's got sort of an understanding, and then how to do the actual forms. And then it's got some next level stuff, like how to level up and start using tax advantaged accounts to make things better and put that oxygen mask of financial safety on yourself, which
right.
Of course,
so
as artists, you know that artists need that. I know personally.
We're going to come back to that term, tax advantaged accounts, because I don't actually know what that means.
Sure. That is fine.
We'll put a pin on that. Now, is there anything that this book doesn't cover that somebody might think it covers?
I kind of think of it like the reverse. It covers some stuff you wouldn't expect.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely geared towards people who are self-employed. And so that is actually beyond just artists. I am an artist. And so obviously a lot of the stories are going to center around my own experiences and artists who I've worked with. But it's really for anybody, whether it's like an Uber driver or a jewelry maker or anybody who's in a self-employed gig economy type of world.
And can you tell us what this book looks like? And I mean, there's the cover itself, which I think we've talked about off podcast, which I think the covers are always a challenge to figure out. But I'm also curious, like inside the book, I know you have some like sort of funny pictures and like little asides and things like that. How does that look in the form of a book?
Yeah. So part of the structure of the book is there's a dominatrix character, which really it's not like it's a X-rated book or anything, but it's just like I was thinking like what is the most palatable way to give the sort of tough side of taxes, because there are deadlines, there are penalties, and I was like, well, a dominatrix might be at least a little sexy as you talk about punishment. So she's pretty gentle, but it's just a little cartoony dominatrix. Hey, you got to do this, and this is why. There's also chapter summaries because and the dominatrix and the chapter summaries, to me, I'm structuring the book so that if you buy this book on April 10th, I mean, you're going to get more out of it if you buy it on January 1st. But if you buy it on April 10th, that I want you to be able to still use it and skip to the chapter summaries, skip to the like, here's how to go fast parts. But there's also these like, there's also these asides in it that are like sunlight, because I think of my business as like 95% sunlight and 5% Dom.
That's really interesting that you have that breakdown figured out.
I think that's why the idea came to me, because when I was running a tax practice, there's a lot of hand-holding, there's a lot of gentleness, a lot of like judgment-free attitude, but in the end, the deadline is real. And so like there's just this little edge to the dominatrix, like, okay, and now it's time. You got to get this in. It's time.
I actually love that in the book you have a line that's just, I don't remember exactly how it's phrased. You phrase it brilliantly, but it's just like, the IRS really likes deadlines. So I definitely appreciated that. For some reason, I sort of imagined, and this, I guess because it's just the context that I have for certain types of asides was like, have you ever looked at the Generation X book by Douglas Copeland?
Oh, no.
So he wrote this like 20 plus years ago now, but Generation X tells the story of people who are of Generation X at that time relatively young, but stuck in like desk cubicle jobs and things like that, which he names like veal fattening pens.
Did he have a big article in the Times, or there was like a review about it? Because I think I did hear about it through that.
It was sort of a phenomenon, but what I think an aside is in a book now is defined by that book, because they were all things in the margin. So there was the main text, but often I would just read what was in the margins, because sometimes it was more interesting than the story itself.
Well, you probably noticed there's some really opinionated footnotes in my book.
Yes. And that's kind of where I was going with this, is that even though it's a different type of book, it is completely nonfiction. But that is the sort of visual structure that I imagined for it.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that, I wanted to just to ask you about or start talking about was the parts of the book that kind of surprised me. And this, in some ways, this will sound so patently obvious because the book is called Taxes for Humans. But I still kind of assumed, and don't take this the wrong way, Hannah, I still kind of assumed it would be boring. And
It's okay to assume a tax book would be boring, but I hope it's not.
I love everything you do, Hannah, but I will confess that I don't love taxes. Yeah, so I was really surprised by the fact that your book, Taxes for Humans, wasn't boring. I think I assumed that it would be because I've purchased those for dummies books, nonprofits for dummies, computers for dummies, etc., which promise that they'll teach people who are quote unquote bad at those subjects, but are often too boring to actually deliver on that promise. You're nerdy about the subject in a way that makes this much more than just a how-to book. So in your book, you note that there's no tax education in this country, which I think a lot of us don't even notice, even though it's foundational to what we do. So it's just crazy. I mean, we have to do it more than we have to vote. And
Absolutely. And also, like, you're preyed upon because you don't know it. Like, it's even
yes.
worse.
Oh
If
my
you
God,
knew
it's so
how it
true.
all worked. Yeah, and if you knew how it all worked and you had no fear, then these big tax companies that I'm not going to name, but we all know who they are, their marketing method is like, "Ooh, this is so scary. It's so complicated. You could not possibly understand this. Just pay us. We'll do it for you." Right? Like, I am literally trying to bypass. It's my goal for those companies to hate me and want this book dead, because this
Oh,
book
I
is
love it. I love it. I love it.
this book is your path around them, right? Like, I feel like
Right.
that is against our civic interest. And I just want people to be able to know how it works. And yeah, I mean, this is art school at work here, right? Like, this is the art school brain. Like, let's break down the system, break down the structure. Like, I can't help
Oh,
but
that's
be an
so
artist as I
true.
write the book. So that's in there.
That is so true. I have called this book a hope machine. And this this is something that I for everybody here, you may see my name on the book because I blurred the book. But I wondered if you could talk to me a little bit just about that. I think that this everything we've talked about thus far reinforces that phrasing and that label, to me anyway. And I know it resonated with you too. And I just want to know why.
Yeah, so much. And first of all, thank you for saying that. I'm glad you felt it. I think, like, even the name of my company, Sunlight, is hopeful. It's just part, I think it's part of my core values, is I just think, like, things might be bleak and things maybe are bleak and things have actually been bleaker in the past. We're not the first humans to experience terrible government and terrible prospects, but I just think there's nothing without hope. I mean, that really
Yeah.
is, as long as I have well, what can I do at the end? Then I feel like, okay, well, there's a path, right? And so
Yeah.
it's so important to me, like, especially as I'm going to critique the structures, that I say, and here's what we can do about it. So, like, one of the things that, I mean, it's like my secret agenda. I have two secret agendas in this book. One is to get people to save more money for themselves. But the second secret agenda is, especially because who this book is geared for is people who are really traditionally underpaid, partly because we're so passionate about the work we do. And that might be artists. We all know that's true, right?
Yep.
We can see that. But it's also people who, like, do consulting work for nonprofits and have, like, a vision, or like a Hispanic first generation woman living here who, like, sees a problem for Spanish speakers in this, like, English dominant environment, and it, like, creates a little business that is built to help her community. Like, people like that, we tend to be underpaid. And so I feel like that passion, it has another side, which is a superpower, which is, like, we know that it's about more than money. And I am not going to write this book without trying to harness that power, because I think when we understand what a fair tax law looks like, we are naturally positioned as advocates, as people who are passionate about the work we do, passionate about changing our communities. And when you understand that the language you use to talk about taxes is actually being programmed in for you by your corporate overlords who want you to have a certain framework as you think about taxes, that they're always terrible. Well, that's not true if you're benefiting from Medicaid or Medicare or, like most people in the lower and middle class benefit from taxes. We actually get more from taxes, get more back than we give into them. Well, the wealthy don't, and they really want to cut that. They don't like that. And so it's a bad look for billionaires to be like, hey, don't tax my corporate jet. But I think, you know what? I think we should. So I just feel harnessing that energy just feels absolutely like the opportunity that's just lying there when you educate people about taxes. Like, okay, and we could use these words instead of these words, and that would reframe it away from that awful vision of billionaires to the one that's more positive towards our community. And then not only that, like fund the IRS, which, to give away one of my chapters, is an idea in the book.
I feel like that should be a mandate. Like it shouldn't have to be an idea.
I know. It's so bananas. I mean, just to touch on that, since I'm like dropping
please.
That, training that. If you start to think about how we're being trained to think about taxes, like one of the ways that a billionaire can get somebody like us, who it's in our interest to have strong public schools and well-paved roads, how can they make it sort of feel to us like we should say, yeah, cut the billionaires' taxes. I want that. So they do things like say, paint the IRS like a boogeyman. And so when the IRS is a boogeyman, the IRS is the tax collector. Well, tax collection from you and me is really easy. There are these automated letters that they send out because you and I have sort of fill in the blank type taxes. It's very black and white. But when you are in that 9% of taxpayers who itemize, by the way, just for everybody listening, itemizing is totally different from your business deductions. That's not itemizing, just because some people are going to hear that and be confused.
Also, but that's in the book.
Yeah, it is. Definitely. But itemizing is something that basically well-heeled taxpayers do, the top 9%. And once you're in that particular slice of the tax code, now there's actually tax decisions and like decision making and judgments. And to go up against somebody who is a billionaire or multi-millionaire, the IRS has to face their army of tax accountants and lawyers, right? And so it's very expensive to audit Bill Gates, right? Because he's going to fight you with a lot of resources. And so those, statistics are pretty clear that it works. Like it's worth the money because you get, for every dollar you give to the IRS to do that kind of tax collection, you get $12 back in the US Treasury. But the billionaires don't like it very much. So if you underfund the IRS, they lose the ability to go after tax cheats, wealthy tax cheats. And the only people they can afford to audit are the middle class.
Are the regular people.
That's right, because it costs a postage stamp to audit us. So actually cutting the IRS budget makes our audits go up, not down. But we think we don't know that. We don't know that. Yeah, so we say, yeah, I hate the IRS. We take on this thinking like, yeah, I hate the IRS. Yeah, screw those guys. Yeah, cut their budget, as though it's good for us. And it's not.
Right. It's awful.
It is awful, but there's a solution.
What? Now we know.
There's a solution. Fully fund the IRS. And then also, not only do they then go after wealthy tax cheats, but they also pick up the phone when you call them when you need help.
I actually love that about the IRS because as far as bill collection goes, they actually are the nicest people I've ever talked to when it comes to that.
Truly. And you and I both know this.
Yes.
I'm saying that because I know it, before, part of the story of this book is I'm not coming from a superior position here. I've screwed everything up. I have had dealings with the IRS. And so going back to school is how I was trying to help everybody not have to suffer the misery that I have. So.
Yeah, well, and that's why it's so good that this book exists. And this book also comes with a workbook. So talk to me about this, because this, I don't know, there there was I'm going to date myself so badly right now, but I remember when you could get books and they were like nonfiction books that are about business, and they would come with CDs that you could put into your computer.
Uh-huh.
Like, they'd have various things on them. How does the workbook work?
Yeah. So the workbook is additional to the book, but it's got a lower word count. So it's not really, basically, the simple way to think of it is the book is the teacher, the workbook is the coach.
Got it.
The book is really helping you understand your taxes, the context of your taxes, how to set up those systems that will make them easier every year, and how to actually do your taxes, and then sort of some next level stuff. The workbook is actually kind of like, you've already read the book. Now, what's blocking you from implementing it? And it's mindset exercises that are like, okay, so where is this fear coming from that you're experiencing? Let's talk about like what are the blockers that if you were to kind of journal through them, you could start to make some movement towards better savings for yourself, better systems for yourself. And the workbook also has a tax organizer. It's actually about a third of the workbook is just the step-by-step actual questions that you need to have answered in order to do your taxes. So effectively, if you go through and answer every question in the workbook, your taxes are almost done. So you just take that info and plug it into, IRS free file, TurboTax, or you can hand it to your accountant. And Patty, because if I may say that you were a former tax client of mine and had a tax practice, this is based on that organizer that you've experienced from me. It's a more fleshed out version, but that organizer that I gave to all my clients was like one of my big work projects every year, is like really making it understandable. That's, so you have kind of experienced what the feeling of that organizer is.
I mean, that organizer is incredible. And I'll just tell people that was my experience with it fully optimized Hannah Cole version. When I took it, I think it's super simple, super easy to follow. Now, I do wonder, can you just explain how the workbook is delivered?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's in print. Eventually, there will be an ebook version. I'm not sure it's out at the time that this podcast comes out. I mean, the plans are that there's an ebook of both. But I actually personally would probably prefer the physical workbook because, you can write in it. I mean, it's built with space for the prompts and also for the organizer. Now, you might actually, it's written in a pretty evergreen way, and you could actually just photocopy the organizer and keep using it each year. This is one of the things that I had to address with the book, because I was like, I really am not in this to try to resell this book every year. I want people to have a resource that they can keep and that they can.
Yeah.
I'm actually saying this is what's going to change every year, right? These little cost of living adjustments, inflation adjustments, they will go up, but here's the URL to the site where you can see what this year's rates are. So the book is written in an evergreen way, including that tax organizer. And it says like, this is the internet search you need to do at the beginning of the year as you sit down with this organizer to just look for tax changes for this year. But with that little search added on, here it is. And then also there is a QR code in the book that you can go to my website and download an updated one. So that's another way to get it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Super easy.
Yeah.
So I want to circle back to something that's come up a couple of times already, but I wanted to dig into it a little bit more, which is this thing that I think a lot of us, pretty much every artist has experienced, which is maybe feeling judged or simply worrying about feeling judged by an accountant. And I just wanted to ask, like, how does this book address that? Like, how is it different from that kind of familiar experience? Because so many of us, I mean, obviously the reason that a lot of us worry about feeling judged is that we'll have a lot of crazy line items on our expense list that might be like pizza or bubble gum or some really rarefied material that doesn't look like a material at all. I bought like 100 hair strands from a duck or whatever for my
Totally, right.
like at a regular accountant is going to be like, what is this? Right. And a lot of times when, your pizza might be like, this was the payment that I could afford to give the people who are helping me launch this exhibition. And having to explain that feels like you might be wasting money, but actually that's the best way to reward these super shoestring budgets. And so I just wondered how the book addresses these really human concerns that end up as line items.
Totally. I mean, when I first sat down as a professional artist and went to my dad's accountant, and I told this story in the book, but I sat down with him and like the first words out of his mouth, I had all these hopes, right? Because I knew, this feels a little complicated. I'm starting to realize that I maybe need some like bookkeeping, or I don't know how I'm going to do retirement when I'm on my own. Like, how does this stuff work, right? And the first words out of his mouth are, so when are you going to get a real job? And I know. And I hope nobody listening has ever experienced that degree of disrespect in an accounting setting, but I bet you have. I bet you have experienced it, or you have a friend who had. And even if you haven't, you maybe don't want to talk to an accountant because you're fearful you're going to experience that. And it's so awful to be trying to get help, expensive help, from somebody who just doesn't even respect what you do as legitimate. So really, the most important thing to me in this book, I had it in Sharpie next to me as I was reading the whole time. I mean, as I was writing the book, is like, there is no judgment here. I know you're not coming to this with an extensive tax education. We're starting on the ground floor and you are welcome here. And art is, I think you can feel, Patty, and please confirm if this is true, but like, it's coming from a place of like, your work is important. Your work is so important that I want you to protect it. And I want you to have the money to really power it in the way it deserves. Because I've felt that judgment. And it was so hampering. And it actually put a chip on my shoulder for years that was really hard to work out of.
Well, I'm really glad that you did work out of it. And if there's one silver lining here, is it feels like that particular experience led you to do what you do. And that is a net plus for a lot of people. So what is different about your approach?
I mean, I think a lot of it is that very thing. And I say this, I do a lot of teaching. This book is teaching. And the thing that I really like to leave people with every time is just kind of like a rallying cry, because I am not myself a professional artist because I think it's frivolous or unimportant. In fact, I think it's the most important work that I could be doing. And I believe that the work that creative people like us are working on is the stuff that moves people, the stuff that changes the culture so that we have massive change. And who doesn't see that we need that right now?
Yes.
And so to me, like empowering the people who are the change makers of our culture, the empathy muscle of our culture, that feels like the work that is needed, right? Like that is,
yeah, absolutely.
That is why I do this, because I never want to hear, and I've heard too many times, I never want to hear an artist say, I was an artist, I was doing this incredible work, but I quit because of money. This is a preventable tragedy, right? We don't need to be saying that. And so this book is really here because I believe in what we do, as artists, and I don't want anybody quitting because of money.
Yeah. And on that note, are there stories of artists? Obviously, we want to protect the identity of people that you've done taxes for, but like of artists getting their taxes on track that you want to share with us? Because I also think that one of the, I don't know if it's a misconception exactly, but I think it sort of is. There is this idea that like taxes won't actually make that much difference. Like,
Mhm.
you're just filling in forms. Like, how much can you actually do if you're not making tons of money? And it would be helpful to get a sense of like what actually can change,
Mm,
especially if you think nothing can.
yeah. Well, for one thing, there are these. So you said to put a pin in tax advantaged accounts. So here I'll circle back to that one. There are these kinds of accounts that the US government sets up deliberately to encourage people like us to set aside money in savings to pay for things that are frankly expensive, that are a lot of money. So the biggest one, of course, is retirement, but also these accounts exist for healthcare and for education. And the reason, and again, like I talk about this in the book a lot, but the reason is not just charitable. It's not just because the government feels nice. They're doing it because it's in the interest of the US population and the US government. It's much cheaper for Americans to save enough money for themselves to have a comfortable, safe retirement than for you to end up in a state-run nursing home, right? I used to volunteer in one, so I've actually seen the inside of those places. But so you have these accounts, an IRA is one example, but there's actually others like a solo 401k or a SEP IRA. These are kinds of accounts that are set up with contribution limits each year that if you put money into them, that money becomes non-taxable, right? It's sheltered from taxation. So you actually get this big tax savings when you use those accounts. And the sort of deal you're making when you put that money in is that you're putting that money on a high shelf for yourself. It's still your money, but it's your money for later. It's your money for this purpose, which is retirement or healthcare or education. And so using those accounts can actually lower your taxes really substantially, meaning you save thousands of dollars each year. And that's money that either you can filter into those accounts very directly, or you can use to pay for a nicer studio or just basic security, right? So that's one way. I mean, another way, I'm coming to you from Asheville, North Carolina. Hurricane Helene destroyed my studio and the studios of many artists here. And taxes are a way that there is a benefit when you have a loss from a federally declared disaster zone. You get to take that loss as subtracted against all your other income, and you get a really big tax savings from it. So I was talking to my friend, I'm going to leave her anonymous, but I was talking to my friend whose studio was destroyed in Helene, and she normally would pay like between $18,000 and $25,000 in taxes every year. And because of losses that she was able to report on her taxes last year, she paid about $500 in tax. So just think about what a savings that is, like $20,000 of savings in a year that, of course, like this is the year she needs that help. So that is one of the ways that taxes really give back to you. And I think I am on this very, very uphill climb of trying to coach people in this country that taxes are not evil. In fact, they can really be helpful and really to our benefit as a society and as individuals. And I'm going up against the lobbyists for the billionaires, which is not an easy project. But like, frankly, taxes benefit us. They benefit the poor and the middle class. And billionaires don't like to pay into them because they have their own private security. They don't really care if our police forces are good and ethical and well paid and non-corrupt.
So I'm really glad that we got the tax advantage account question answered because I didn't want to forget about that and you came back to it naturally. I did want to come back to the question of whether there were any stories of artists getting their taxes on track that you wanted to show or share with us, because I do think that it's always helpful for people to hear like other examples that might be like themselves.
Yeah. So there's a couple I'd love to share. One short one that is in the book is just about how much more you can do when you don't have the self-consciousness of feeling judged. I had a client, for obvious reasons, I'm not going to name this person,
Sure.
but he was enviable from an art perspective. Like I was fangirling so hard. This is a person who was in the Whitney Biennial and had a retrospective at a major museum. Just a hell of an artist, right? But of course, you don't see that. You know, that's the part you would see on Instagram. And this artist needed this person had back taxes, and back taxes are when you have multiple years of tax returns that are unfiled. And what I have found is that when somebody gets into a situation where they have years of taxes that they haven't filed, it's usually because something went terribly wrong in their life, right? That's usually somebody who's really struggling. Sometimes it's a divorce or an illness. It's usually something bad, right? And yet that person tends to carry all this guilt about it, like they're terrible. And I'm afraid that a lot of accountants reinforce that idea with them. So this person, I was like, back taxes are actually some of my favorite people to talk to because they're fixable. It's more emotional weight, and it's actually not that hard. So it's like, it's a situation where the emotion is the hard part and not the taxes. But this person, I just was like patient and gave him grace for, you know, it was just a non-blamey situation. It was like, hey, we're going to fix this. You're going to be fine. We'll do this. And after we got it in, he sent me a note and he said, hey, I didn't tell you this at the time, but I had just gotten out of rehab. I've been really, really struggling with addiction. And I just didn't even know if I could tell anybody that. And it got me into this hole with my taxes, and we got out of it. And I really needed that extra time that I asked for and that you granted me. That was because my apartment at the time was like a triggering environment. And I knew that if I had to like rush in there and do something that I found emotionally difficult, like go through my tax records, that I was going to use again. And so it was like this sort of patience.
Oh God. Wow.
Yeah. It was just like, he was like, the fact that you kind of were just chill about it and didn't pressure me or make me feel judged, it allowed me to get this fixed without using again, without going back on all my work and struggle. And so I think about that and that person all the time, partly because it's one of these people who you look at like a superstar in Mount Olympus. And to hear that story, I was like, wow, the behind the scenes is so, so different from the public persona. And this person really needed grace. So it's just, that was really important. But even just from a more, I don't know, normal is not the word I want to use, but just maybe a little more everyday scenario.
Yeah.
I had a client who's a musician. And she did a lot of touring, like many musicians, right? She's traveling a lot, doing gigs in other states. And so she would miss her mail a lot, right? Like she didn't have...
Right.
She's in like a roommate. She has the cheapest rent she can possibly have, a lot of roommates. Like her mail kind of gets lost sometimes. And so she was actually getting IRS notices and not knowing. And you can picture that can get into a bad situation. So with her, we sat down and I helped just give her the basics. You know, she like kind of I got her up to speed with like, okay, so you're going to want to do some simple bookkeeping, just like track your expenses using a separate bank account for your music expenses. And once you do that and get it set up on bookkeeping, this is all going to become less mysterious and much easier. And just that kind of key, nobody had told her about that or about quarterly taxes and that had to get paid. And once she did, she's like, I just needed the information, right? I didn't need a lecture, but I needed that information and I was missing it. And it's like not quite straightforward enough for just a tax preparer. But as soon as she got that settled, she started actually tracking things and paying quarterly taxes. And so for the first time in her life, she stopped being behind on her taxes and she actually filed everything on time. And she's like looking through her records and she's like, oh my gosh, I like know where everything is now. Right. Which, it's a big deal.
I love both of those stories because particularly in the latter one of the things that it illustrates too is just the different types of life that you can have as an artist and how it impacts even pretty basic things like getting your mail, right? And I think in both cases, like some of the hurdles were related to things that feel very ordinary, right? Like going to your apartment, doing these, getting your mail, taking care of these tasks. But when they are weighted, they become really big mountains. And so having somebody who's able to just like, let's just shrink the size of this thing a little bit so that we have a sense of what's actually involved. And then we can take care of it. To me, that's just beautiful. I mean, the other thing one of the things that guides our behavior is just the types of things that we like to do. So artists like to be in the studio, so they're going to spend more time there. I think a lot of us don't like doing our taxes are much lower on the list of things that we enjoy doing. Yeah. And I think about all these people who are in business and manage money for a living. They like it, like, so taxes, doing something that is related to something you like is a lot easier than when it's doing something related to a task that you don't care for,
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to be really honest with you and say, like, I don't like looking at spreadsheets and being all up in my records. Like, I would rather be in the studio any day of the week. And so I am not teaching this from the perspective of a person who's like, yeah, let's get in the spreadsheet. Let's do
this is going to be real fun.
I'm like, I'm going to give you the perspective of somebody who frankly hates this, so you can get in and out as fast as you can. Because I know you have other things you'd rather be doing. It's not like I'm not imagining you're going to love taxes. Some people do. They're rare. But
I do.
I also think the reason that I'm good at teaching this stuff is because I've been so terrible at it, right? If this all came naturally to me, how could I teach well? Like, I actually have had garbage taxes in my life, and I know how shameful I have felt and how awful and judged. And I'm just here to be like, that was not helpful. And I'm not going to help people by piling that on top of what is already a stressful situation. Like, I'm going to just teach you what you need, right?
But I also think that going back to something you said earlier, which is that you give people the larger context. And that is something actually that artists are really used to, like dealing with context. Like it's not just that you make this simple and easy to understand. You put it in a language so that artists and creative people understand it, because you give it conceptual weight. So it's more interesting. And I think that's the thing that I hate to put it in such a bombastic way, but it's who I am. That is the thing that I find astonishing about this book. It is not boring. To circle back to that, like, that was the biggest surprise from start to finish. And I absolutely love it. So for anybody who wants a not boring book on taxation for humans, where can they find us?
The book is in any bookstore that you like. My favorite bookstore is your local independent bookseller. So whoever that is for you. Here in Asheville, it's Malaprops Books, who I love. You can get it at big online book places as well. But anywhere you would buy a book is where you can get Taxes for Humans. If you want to go to my website, I have a link that rotates through a huge list of independent bookstores. If you don't have one that you know or care about and you want to go indie, you can go to sunlighttax.com/book. I took a little extra effort to make that because I'm contractually obligated to have a very large book retailer on my website as part of my publishing deal. But I also am the artist who's like, but let's try the indie.
And I just want to say, for anybody who hears this and listens to this around the Christmas season, it is a great Christmas gift. You can put it in your family stocking, your friends, they all need it. You can leave little Taxes for Humans in your studios, your friends' studios, and I think they will really appreciate that.
I love that. Also, to anybody who is just feeling pinched beyond all reason right now, and I know those people are out there and are listening, you can request the book at your library or your college library as well. That's another possibility.
Fantastic. So there are all kinds of ways to get this book. I recommend purchasing it and purchasing another one for your friends. Hannah, thank you so much for being a guest on the Art Problems podcast again. Every time you're on, I learn something else, and it's always like there's just a little bit of thrill. So thank you.
Paddy, thank you. I love the way that you don't pull your punches. Nothing about you has changed in that regard since I met you. And I just love, you're like, well, you know what? I thought it would be boring. And it's not. So thank you so much for reading it, for blurbing the book, for being a wonderful quote on the cover. And just thanks for being a friend and having me on the podcast.
Anytime. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. It really helps. I'm so grateful. My tax guide, Taxes for Humans, is available wherever you buy books and at sunlighttax.com/book. This podcast is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links I reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.